All right, let's dive into something really fascinating. We got some excerpts from this book, um, Bioenergetics. It's from 1957 by Albert Szent-Györgyi. And wow, this stuff is really making me think.
Yeah, he was, a Nobel Prize winner and really ahead of his time, especially when it comes to like how energy actually works in our cells. He was trying to figure out this really basic but important question. How does the energy that's like locked up in these chemical bonds, think like ATP, how does that energy get used to actually do stuff like power our cells?
So it's not just about like how much energy is there, but like how do we actually use it?
Exactly. He said just counting calories like we do with food, that doesn't really tell us the whole story. It's like knowing how powerful an atomic bomb is without knowing how it actually explodes.
Okay, I think I see what you mean. So what's missing from this whole like counting calories idea?
Well, it's this idea of excitation energy. It's a type of energy that's way more dynamic. It's like the energy that really makes things happen in our cells, makes them work.
So it's not just about having energy stored up. It's got to be like transformed into something our cells can actually use, like to make our muscles move or to build structure.
Yeah, you got it. And Szent-Györgyi, he thought water played a huge role in this whole transformation thing, and he thought it was a role that people often miss.
Wait, water. I always thought water was, just kind of there, like it's what all the important molecules float around in.
That's what a lot of people think.
Hmm.
But Szent-Györgyi's research, it suggests that water is so much more than just like a background player. He thought that the way water molecules arrange themselves, the structure of the water, that's really important for how energy moves around and works inside our cells.
So it's not just about drinking enough water.
Nope, it's way more than that. We're talking about like these intricate water structures. They form around molecules, almost like little icebergs, and they can affect how those molecules interact with each other.
I'm picturing these like tiny little groups of water molecules that are constantly forming and breaking apart, and they're like affecting how everything moves and reacts. That's happening in all our cells.
That's a great way to visualize it. And yeah, these water structures are always changing depending on, well, lots of things like the temperature or if there are ions around. It's a constant dance happening in every cell of our bodies right now.
Wow, this is making me realize that water is so much more organized
Yeah.
and dynamic than I ever thought. But how does this all connect to, how energy gets transferred in our cells?
That's where things get even more interesting. Szent-Györgyi, he was really fascinated by something called triplet states. These are special types of excited electron states that can last a pretty long time. And he thought these triplet states were really important for moving energy around efficiently in our cells.
Triplet states. I'm going to need some help with that one.
Okay, so think about electrons. They usually hang out in pairs and they spin in opposite directions. But sometimes an electron can get excited. And when that happens, it can flip its spin. And that creates what we call a triplet state.
So it's like one of the electrons in the pair decides to spin the same way as his partner.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And what makes these triplet states special is that they can hold on to their energy for much longer than, normal excited states. And that makes them much more useful for like transferring energy and doing work inside the cell.
So they're like tiny little energy carriers holding on to that excitation energy we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And here's where water comes back in. Szent-Györgyi, he discovered that water, especially when it forms those ice-like structures, can actually make these triplet states more stable. It helps them last longer, so they can actually be useful in our cells.
Well, I always learned that water was kind of a pain in physics experiments because it's so messy and hard to predict.
You're right. But in biology, we can't ignore it, right? Water is what makes life possible. And Szent-Györgyi's research, it suggests that water is way more involved in what happens in our cells than we thought before.
So basically, we have all these tiny organized pockets of water inside our cells, and they're like little energy transfer stations. They use these triplet states to move energy around and, power everything our cells do. It's like a tiny power grid.
It really is a remarkable idea, and it might just change how we think about water and how important it is for life.
For sure.
Yeah.
But now I'm wondering about, like, what this means for us. Does this change how we think about staying hydrated?
That's a great question. And it's something that Szent-Györgyi was really interested in himself.
So we've been talking about how water is like way more than just a simple solvent. And its structure, the way the molecules are arranged, is super important for how energy, moves and works in our cells. But how does this all connect to like our health? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, Szent-Györgyi thought that if these water structures get messed up, then the energy transfer that they're involved in, that can get messed up too. And he thought that might be like at the root of some really serious diseases.
Whoa, okay, so like what kind of diseases are we talking about here?
Well, he talks specifically about cancer. Cancer cells grow out of control, right? And that takes a ton of energy. So, Szent-Györgyi, he thought that if the energy transfer system in a cell gets disrupted, well, that could be part of what's making those cells grow uncontrollably.
That makes sense. But how would these water structures get messed up in the first place?
That's a really good question. It's complicated and we're still figuring a lot of it out. But Szent-Györgyi found some interesting clues. He was studying this molecule called dinitrophenol, or DNP for short. It's known to mess up energy production in cells.
Wait a minute, DNP, wasn't that used as like a weight loss drug a while back?
Yeah, it was for a little while because it basically makes cells burn through energy like crazy as heat. But then it got banned really fast because it was super dangerous.
Oh yeah, I remember that now. It had had some pretty bad side effects. But what does that have to do with water structures?
Well, Szent-Györgyi found that DNP, it also disrupts water structures. And what's really interesting is that he saw that DNP, it causes this thing called muscle contracture. It's when muscles, they just get stuck, like permanently contracted.
It's messing with energy A&D water structures. That sounds like a pretty strong connection.
Right. And the muscle contracture thing, that suggests that maybe the DNP is interfering with, like, the energy transfer that you need to keep muscles relaxed. It shows how even things that seem passive, like our muscles relaxing, they
Yeah.
still need this careful balance of energy and water structure to work.
I see. So messing with that balance can have like ripple effects through the whole body,
Mhm.
maybe leading to like all kinds of problems.
You got it. And this isn't all just theory. Szent-Györgyi, he also studied this muscle disorder. It's called myotonia congenita. It's a genetic condition that makes muscles stiffen up. They have a hard time relaxing.
Oh, wow. So kind of the opposite of like muscle weakness. It's like the muscles get stuck in the on position.
Uh-huh.
I can see why he was interested in that with all this stuff about DNP and muscle contracture.
Exactly. And here's the thing, myotonia congenita, you can actually cause it in animals using this herbicide. It's called 2,4-D.
A herbicide, like the stuff people use to kill weeds. That's a weird connection.
Yeah, right. But just like DNP, Szent-Györgyi found that this 2,4-D stuff, it also seemed to be messing with water structures and energy transfer. So it seems like all these different molecules, even though they do totally different things, they all have this one thing in common. They affect water structure, and that's super important for energy balance.
It's amazing. It's like a whole new way of looking at how our cells work. So if even small changes to these water structures can have such big effects on our health,
Mhm.
I mean, what can we do to protect them? Is it more than just like how much water we drink?
That's what Szent-Györgyi was trying to figure out, and it's something scientists are still working on today. He thought that if we could understand how water is involved in the energy in our cells, that could lead to, like, completely new ways to treat all kinds of diseases.
Wow, I can't wait to hear more about that. What else did he find out about water and energy? All right, so we're back, and I'm like really ready to hear more about St. George's research. We've covered water structures, how energy gets transferred, and how if those things get messed up, it could maybe cause diseases like cancer and muscle problems. But what's next? What else did he find?
Well, Szent-Györgyi, he was always looking for connections, like deeper patterns that could explain how life works, all the complexity. And one of the most interesting connections he found was with the thymus gland.
The thymus, that's like part of the immune system, right? What does that have to do with muscles and energy?
That's what makes Szent-Györgyi so cool. He wasn't afraid to just follow the evidence wherever it led, even if it meant going against what everyone thought. He noticed that when you take out the thymus, it often made symptoms better in people with myasthenia gravis. It's a condition where your muscles get weak.
So if taking out the thymus makes muscle weakness better, does that mean it's like involved in making muscles contract?
Yeah, that was his thinking. And remember, he was already looking into myotonia congenita, where muscles get too contracted. So he started to wonder, maybe the thymus makes something, some kind of substance that affects how muscles work, and that maybe even by acting on those water structures we've been talking about.
Oh, so maybe the thymus is like a control center, sending out signals that tell muscles to contract or relax. And maybe those signals work through the wire structures that are so important for energy.
So did he ever find this mystery substance from the thymus?
He tried to like isolate it, but it was really hard. He even injected thymus extracts into his goats, the ones that had myotonia, to see if it would help. Wait a second. He had goats with myotonia. Okay, now that's a story I've got to hear.
It's pretty wild. He had a whole herd of goats that they naturally got myotonia congenita, and he used them to study the disease.
Wow, he was really dedicated. So what happened? Did the thymus stuff help the goats?
He saw some good results. It did seem to make the myotonia better, but it was like really slow, and it didn't always work.
It sounds like he was onto something, but maybe the research was just like too advanced for the time.
Yeah, probably. But all that work with the thymus and his observations with myasthenia gravis and myotonia congenita, it led him to a bigger idea. He started to think that the thymus and maybe even the whole lymphatic system, that they play a much bigger role in controlling what happens in our cells than we thought.
It's like he was always searching for those hidden connections, the patterns that link together all these different parts of the body.
Exactly. And it all comes back to his main idea, Everything inside the cell is connected, and water and energy transfer, they're like the conductors of this whole orchestra of life.
I love that analogy. We often just like take water for granted, but what Szent-Györgyi showed us is that it's anything BUT simple. It's like dynamic and structured and totally essential for life itself.
Yeah. He saw water not as just some, solvent, but as a matrix, a medium that shapes how energy flows and makes all these complex and beautiful processes of life possible.
And that's so important to remember now. In a world where we're always bombarded with information and like stimuli,
Yeah.
it's easy to forget about these basic things that are so important for keeping us alive.
It's a good reminder to think about how everything's connected, from the smallest water molecule to the huge networks in our bodies. And to be, amazed and curious about the mysteries of life.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been amazing, and I'm definitely thinking about water in a whole new way now.
Me too. And like St. Georgie said, research is to see what everybody has seen and think what nobody has thought.
So true. Keep those water structures healthy, everyone, and keep thinking deeply. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into all the fascinating stuff in science and discovery. Until then, stay curious.